Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Mark Etheridge. We are here to recap Week 12 around the SEC. Getting near there, 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Yeah.
I will be on the literal Highway to Hoover, Mark, the day after. So we're barreling down the end of the season here to the point where I heard a bunch over the weekend of, as announcers were just looking at the schedules ahead, I heard a lot of no more midweek games or just one more midweek games, but it's just conference from here on out, like that kind of stuff. So we really are getting down to the business end of it. So plenty to talk about both in the immediate picture and in the big picture. And so we'll get to a lot tonight. But first, I have to remind you, this episode of Highway to Hoover is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors, which is your new home for Jordan Brand. Gear up today and take flight. Make your play in the latest head-to-toe Jordan gear for the entire family, available in-store and at academy.com. Unleash your greatness with Jordan Brand, now at Academy. All right, Mark.
Yep.
Let's start. There are a couple places we could have started here, but I'd actually like to start with Auburn and Tennessee.
Okay.
It felt like that series was not just from an on-field perspective, but just everything that happened in that series. It felt like it was very much just on the front of mind all weekend because there was the drama about deciding to start a game that frankly should have never been started. That was one of two instances this weekend of games that shouldn't have started that got started. They get through most of everything they needed to get through yesterday. And then as luck would have it, they get suspended again going to the 10th of the, or early in the 10th. The next day, they have to finish that off this morning. But moral of the story, Auburn wins 2 of 3. And frankly, just outplayed Tennessee all weekend, really.
They did.
Now, if you're a Tennessee fan, you could say, well, if we'd had Liam Doyle all game in game one, sure. We don't know what would have happened then, but the reality is that Tennessee was always going to have to win at least a game with someone other than Liam Doyle on the mound. Right. And so, and funny enough, the game that had the most Liam Doyle on the mound was the one they won because he started the resumption on Sunday afternoon, and they end up winning that game. So Auburn continues to, every time I kind of think, all right, water has found its level. Auburn kind of is what they are. Maybe they're a host team, but maybe not a top 8. They're kind of in that range. They do something like this that forces me to reevaluate them a little bit. And then on the Tennessee side, there's a lot of question about what ails the Vols. And going into the weekend, I kind of was batting those questions away and just kind of like, I'm not sure anything is. They're not as good as they were last year, but they won the national title last year. So that was always probably going to be the case. But now I'm not so sure. So I don't know if you have any more enlightened answer to that as in terms of what ails the Vols, but I've tried to take a few stabs at it and I'm not sure I still know a good answer.
Well, it is very difficult to win on the road in the SEC, and Tennessee has lost its last 3 home series. So obviously that's troubling because, other than Missouri or South Carolina, no one else is losing at home 3 straight weeks. So I do feel like that as a national title contender, and certainly Tennessee still is, say a month ago, we thought they were the best team in the country, and they continue to scuffle. They've lost, 3 of the last 4 series? I guess they won at Ole Miss, but the other ones are 4 of the last 5 now. It's just not where you want it to be. I do feel like losing Liam Doyle in the first, I guess he threw 1 inning, and it actually wasn't his best inning, but he did throw 1 inning and then came back and helped on Sunday and got them the win. That definitely did hurt them, but the rest of the series was pretty much all Auburn. Auburn controlled game 1. The second game went 11 innings, and Superman Doyle came in and got the job done. But then game 3 was pretty much all Auburn as well. Christian Chatterton, who has just been phenomenal in midweek after losing his Sunday spot, came in and was great. Cade Fisher came in and got the job done after him. It was just I mean, Auburn looks like they're finding themselves. I mean, they've been one of those teams that we've kind of thought were upper middle in the SEC, and they're elevating. I really think they're kind of finding what works for them and what doesn't work for them, and they're able to navigate it. And this is a scary team because they have talent. I mean, Ike Irish is one of the best hitters in the country, and he's seemingly getting better every week. You got all those great freshmen. Cooper McMurray, who's like my age and just continues to hit line drives all over the park. I do feel like this is an Auburn team that if they pitch has a chance. I mean, they're an Omaha team. And Samuel Dutton was really good on Friday, or I guess game one. And if Chatterton can continue to elevate and be another starter, they're piecing it together in the middle with Cam Tilly and others. I do feel like this is a team that can do some big things. Then on the flip side, you have Tennessee. It's been an interesting year. They've got so much talent. They've got so many players to pick from, and trying to find the right mixture and combo to put in the lineup every day, and who's going to pitch in what role, and all of that. I am concerned about their bullpen. I don't think I love their starters with Doyle, Phillips, and Russell. I'm not sure after that they really have the guys they've had in the past that could just come in and slam the door. And I feel like that's something that has to get figured out if they're going to reach their goals. Because right now, I mean, we'll have the Nerdcast in the next couple of days and figure out where we think they land. But they're not a top 8 team right now. And I would certainly, a few weeks ago, I would have, anybody who said that, I would have called them a troll, right? Because it just wasn't true. But now it might be true. So the last few weeks are not easy either. I mean, they got Vanderbilt next weekend. They still have to go to Arkansas. I mean, they could lose both those series, and then you're really looking at a tailspin heading into the postseason. They might not even host at that point if they lose both those. So it's a place where Tennessee really has to figure it out and get better. And, Tony got ejected today. He went nuts. He talked to all 4 umpires on the way out and then kicked over a chair on the way in. There's a lot of frustration. And when you have that much talent and that much pedigree and understanding of how to win, it's got to be tough when you continue to drop series that you feel like you should win. And I do feel like Tennessee's a team that certainly could flip the switch and turn it on and be amazing again. But right now they're not that. So they've got to find out whatever it is to get it going. Kind of like what Auburn did. Whatever Auburn did, that's what Tennessee needs to do. Because Auburn, they've struggled on the road, and then they go to one of the hardest venues. If you asked me before the year, what are the hardest venues to win in? Knoxville would be near the top. Okay. And Auburn just won there, and with a whole bunch of freshmen. So I do feel like that's Tennessee's got to figure out whatever Auburn's found out, and then hopefully that they can figure it out from there, because it is troubling right now because of this recent swing.
Yeah, it's I've kind of bottom lined it. You touched on a lot of this, but when I've been asked on radio and what have you in the last week or so about Tennessee, I've bottom lined it largely as I think I like the rotation as much and maybe more than I've liked previous rotations. Mm-hmm. Doyle, Phillips, excellent, and then choose whoever you like the most out of AJ Russell and Tegan Kuhns and whoever else, because the arm, yes, there hasn't been consistency, but the arm talent's as good as, anybody else who's going to be thrown on Sunday for anybody. Right. So, sure. But beyond that, it's not as good a defensive team. The lineup isn't as dangerous. And that's even if you consider that, no one's lineup is as dangerous this year as it was last year, because it's just the ball just doesn't fly this year like it did last year. But even within that context, their lineup is not as dangerous. and their bullpen's not as there's not as much quality and there's not as much depth in their bullpen. So you're kind of just left with, if they don't pitch it lights out, and even if they do, because it's not like they really, at least as I was watching this series, it's not like they pitched terribly.
Right.
Like it's not like that was a real huge problem. But if they don't get their starting pitchers deep into games, it can be problematic. And I also just think it's one of those things that we tend to underestimate how important intangible stuff is. And there were a lot of guys in that national title team for Tennessee last year that were just really, in addition to being superstar players, just really load-bearing walls, if you will, for the program.
Right.
Guys who had been around for a long time that had won a bunch of games. And they kind of redid the roster this year, and it's a lot of transfers, and they are really talented. And I'm not saying that's a problem. I'm just saying that it can be hard to recreate the good vibes of that kind of team with guys who don't have that history in the program.
Yep. Amazing. Yeah, you're right on there. I do feel like that the leadership, wherever that comes from, and every team is different, and how strong a leadership you have, sometimes it's overblown and sometimes it's understated. And I feel like this is a great opportunity for someone in that volunteer locker room to step forward and be that guy that really carries them, because they have players who have been through it all, won the title last year, were key components. Maybe they weren't the stars, but they understand what it takes and what you have to give in order to be a team like that. And I feel like that's where we are right now. If you're Tennessee, you've got to find whatever's missing at this moment and be able to elevate the wherever they're negligent at, right? And certainly bullpen looks like it. Offense today, and their offense has been pretty good throughout, but Auburn kind of had their way with them. Dutton in game 1 and then game 3 today. Tennessee didn't really do a lot. And in today's SEC, you're going to need to score more than a few runs a game to win, because nobody's pitching is just that dominant. I mean, Anthony Ianson, when he's on his roll, accepted. But I do feel like this is a team that can do – I mean, they can still repeat as national champions. They can still do all those things, but they've got to the status quo is not working. They need to flip some things around, stir it up.
I think it's right. The last thing I'll say is that I notice Tennessee offensively, if you flip over to that conference tab, now a lot of the stats are still pretty decent, but man, this is a team with a lot of swing and miss. Yeah. And not necessarily you'll take some swing and miss if it also comes with some walks. And Andrew Fisher gives you that, and to a lesser degree, Dean Curley gives you that, and that's kind of it. It's a lot of guys like Hunter Inslee, 4 walks, 21 strikeouts. Dalton Bargo, 7 walks, 25 strikeouts. Reese Chapman, 6 walks, 31 strikeouts. It's a lot of that. And so that's just tough. Because you're really banking on piling together multiple hits to make rallies happen. And that's just tough, especially in a world where you can't just muscle up seemingly on demand like last year, call on a 3-run homer at any given moment. That's just not on the table to the same degree. So it'll be interesting to watch them moving forward. I'm actually going to go a little out of order, Mark, because you mentioned Tennessee has Vanderbilt next weekend.
Right.
And that series is suddenly far more interesting than I thought it was going to be. 3-4 weeks ago, I would have thought, Vanderbilt will probably be competitive in it because it's Vanderbilt, but I would have had a hard time, no matter where that series was being played, imagining a situation in which Vanderbilt wins it. And now Vanderbilt coming off of winning 2 of 3 against Alabama, including the last game in dramatic fashion, I'm reconsidering that a little bit. I really like where Vanderbilt's at from a starting pitching standpoint. Their bullpen is deeper than what Tennessee has. I think they have the best bullpen guy in the series in Sawyer Hawks.
Yep.
So there's that. Now, the lineup, I'm still probably taking Tennessee, but the Vanderbilt lineup probably couldn't really be a lot more different than Tennessee in terms of, Tennessee's got that really high ceiling of the talent is just so evident, and if they put it all together for a weekend, they're super dangerous. Whereas Vanderbilt has what I'd call a high floor lineup where they may lack some of that ceiling, but at the same time, you kind of know what the baseline is for what they're going to do in terms of putting together good at-bats and being pesky and all that stuff. And so as it is, I don't know where you stand right now, but I'm intrigued by that series a lot more than I thought I would. And shout out to Vanderbilt for today, because I gave up on that game today. I'll be honest. Like, I'll put my hand up. I saw the scores, 7-2 in the 8th in favor of Bama, and I went and cooked dinner because I was like, all right, well, that's over. And then I only found out that Vanderbilt came back and won when somebody put it in our group chat. So, credit to them, because I'd given up on it. But anyway, I just think next weekend suddenly between those two teams has just become far more interesting than I anticipated.
Yeah. I mean, Vandy was down 7-2 in the 8th and had a big 8 and then had a monstrous 9th. And Holcomb hit the walk-off bomb to win it. I mean, Brody Johnson had to hit to tie it. I mean, when you are faced with that sort of deficit against Carson Osmer for Alabama, who's one of the better relievers in the conference, you have to yeah, I mean, the odds are stacked against you, and they were able to step forward and win it. And that does make me feel a little different about Vandy. We love their starting pitching. We love, I don't know, a couple of their bullpen guys, and then their offense has been kind of hit or miss. And they've been pretty good at home, and on the road not as much. So that will be interesting next week in Knoxville. But that's a hitter's park. So, not ready to pick it yet, but I do feel like Tennessee and Vandy they're going into it more as peers, where, to your point, a few weeks ago, certainly Tennessee was here and Vandy was below. And now, yeah, they look pretty dead even right now. And I feel like that Vandy certainly is playing with more momentum. It's trending in the right direction. And I'm probably more confident about them in the postseason. Say both of them host, I'm probably feeling better about Vandy right now. Because Tennessee just keeps dropping games at home. And granted, some good teams involved, but still, I do feel like, with what Vandy did to Alabama today, with how they just roared back, that's this is a team that believes. This is a team that has that mojo going, and I feel pretty confident about how they're going to finish the season.
Yeah, there's some good signs offensively too. I mean, R.J. Austin had a big game on Saturday, still scuffling in SEC play, but his average jumped quite a bit just with that one performance. Braden Holcomb's hitting almost 350 in conference play. Riley Nelson's hitting almost 400 in conference play after a slow start. Jonathan Vastine is swinging it a lot better. So, here and there, like there have been some positive signs. I think that, as I've been putting it, their offense has been perfectly solid, which is more than good enough if they pitch for their standard.
Yeah. And on the other side of that, Alabama, they were looking like, I mean, we're going to do the Nerdcast in the next couple of days. They might have been a host. I mean, with a win at Vandy, their RPI would have moved up. They would have been in pretty good shape to win 16-17, potentially, SEC conference games. I mean, they would have been in great shape, and all of that just dived. Because they finished with Georgia at home and then at Florida, who's suddenly can't lose. So, I mean, it went from a team that probably was going to host to a team that's going to really have to exceed expectations to host, all in 2 innings. And that was, if you're a Bama guy, that's really hard to swallow, because you had your best guys on the mound. You played really well. You kind of roughed up Connor Fennell, no one's done that. And you were in great shape, and then it all just, somebody pulled the rug out. And now they've got to regroup, because they go to Troy on Tuesday. Troy's a pretty good team. It's on the road. And then they got Georgia. And then they got Florida. I mean, Alabama's got to I mean, they can still host, but it's going to be a really, really uphill battle for them to get where they want to be.
Yeah, and not only going to Troy, but I have to imagine that game's pretty doggone close to sold out if it's not.
Oh, yeah.
Just because, it's a SEC team going to Troy.
Right.
So not like, it's a tough team. And also, like, Troy going to Tuscaloosa would be tough enough. But going to Troy makes that even tougher. Probably not what Alabama wants to be dealing with after a series loss. And you're right that they got great work from Riley Quick. They got great work from Zane Adams. Yep. And it's like, well, there's the formula. And to have that just kind of blow up on him is particularly disheartening.
And Osborne's been really good. I mean, he has, and he did work back-to-back days, and maybe that's something that they need to monitor. But it just, you give up, what was it, 7 runs in 2 innings to lose it. That's just hard to deal with.
Yeah. Before we get to everything else that happened this weekend, a quick word for our other sponsor here on Highway to Hoover, Tecovas Boots. Whether it's the leather in your glove or your tailgating chairs, baseball people know that quality matters. That's why we love Tecovas Boots. Born in Texas, just like yours truly, handcrafted with over 200 meticulous steps and comfortable from day one, they're perfect for wherever the college baseball season takes you. From road trips to rivalry games, post-game celebrations, or just everyday wear, Tecovas Boots are made to go the distance. Find your perfect pair today at Tecovas. All right, Mark, let's talk Arkansas sweeping Texas. Before I cede the floor to you, I will just say my overarching take here is that I think obviously it's a big positive for Arkansas, but I even think there's some positive here for Texas in that they were due for a weekend like this. And I think some of how you saw Jim Schlossnagle handle some stuff during the weekend where he's subbing out guys that he didn't like their effort and things like that, I think signaled to me that they internally maybe felt like their team had started to take some things for granted. And so just getting walloped, which is what this was. They just got walloped all weekend. Like, it's probably not the worst thing in the world for Texas moving forward. It stings now, but maybe a good thing in the end. And then for Arkansas, it was just a return to the form that they had lost over the previous 3 weeks that we saw so often prior to that, where they just when they're swinging the bats like they did this weekend, there's probably not a team in the country that has better balance than they do. And it's why I've been pretty steadfast that I still think I like them better than anybody else. We were just kind of waiting on them to show it again, and boy, did they this weekend.
Yeah. I think Arkansas's best is the best in the country. When they're clicking on all cylinders, that's the best team in the country. They just don't always show it. And certainly they lost, 3 series in a row. They needed to go out and kick some ass, and that's what they did this weekend. And I do feel like with Texas, they had the emotional series. They swept A&M. They're feeling 3 tight games. Hey, we could do no wrong. And then you go up to Arkansas and they punch you in the mouth, and it's like, oh, this is different. And I do feel like to your point, they needed that. They needed to be reminded that other teams are also good and other teams can beat you. And the other part of this is Texas is injured. A lot of teams out there are scuffling with injuries, but they lost arguably their best hitter and arguably their best pitcher. So they're trying to understand what life looks like without those players. And I do feel like maybe the A&M series was a little bit of fool's gold. And now they're able to understand, okay, well, what does this look like for us going forward? Because now, I mean, they've got to play Florida, who, you scoff because Florida's near the bottom of the standings, but those jokers are playing great right now. That's going to be a hard series. And then they go to Oklahoma, and who wants to beat Texas more than Oklahoma? Maybe A&M, but other than that, I think it's Oklahoma. So those are 2 hard series to me. And I feel like Texas is going to have to earn it down the stretch to get where they want to be. And certainly they've had a great year up until now, and certainly not negating what they've accomplished. But I do feel like this is kind of for a team that's had so much success during the season, this is a little bit of a crossroads. I mean, you get punched in the mouth, you have to figure out what you're about. And they certainly got decked this weekend. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond, because you had pitchers who had really been, I mean, they've been pitching incredibly well against great offenses, and it didn't work against Arkansas. So can you just go back to what you're doing and against, quote, mortal teams that works? Or do you need to tweak it a little bit? And I think that's what they need to figure out this week before they face Florida. For Arkansas, I mean, this kind of shows the potential of this club. A lot of us, you, me, certainly our D1 guys are all fascinated with just how good this team could be. And they kind of tease us at times. And this was a demonstration of what they can be when they're clicking. And they've got a tough schedule down the stretch. They go to LSU. I'm going to be there, and I can't wait for that. And then they host Tennessee. I mean, those are two really good teams that have a lot to play for still, along with Arkansas. I mean, they're going to have to earn it. And who's going to be more battle tested? You face Texas, you face LSU, you face Tennessee in the last 3 weeks of the season. I feel like Arkansas, whoever they face in a regional, they're going to go, this is not what we've been facing in conference play. So that whole regional bugaboo that's bit them 2 years in a row, that they should be really well suited to deal with it. And the other thing I want to point out is how good Gage Wood has been. He was injured. He missed the bulk of the year and has come back. The first start wasn't good. The second start was, and then last week or this past week, he was dominant, man. Then they follow him with Gabe Gackle, who comes in and just he's really good as well. And I'm just really fascinated with what that potential could be, because those are, when you've got guys with arms like that, and then you're stacking them, piggybacking them, if you will, in those kind of games. Arkansas is going to be hell to deal with, and I feel like that's something they've got going that maybe others don't, because you have arms like that, and you're going to put them in different games, okay, and maximize their usage. And Arkansas doesn't have to do that because they've got so many other players. So, really pleased with what Arkansas did. And in Texas, I mean, we all felt like they were going to get got before the year was over, and this was probably it, and they'll go back to being Texas again. So it's not that you're discouraged over what happened. I just feel like they ran into a buzzsaw, and Arkansas would have probably beat anybody this weekend, and Texas just happened to be the team that drew them. So I look for Texas to finish strong and continue to be, continue their goals like we expected them to.
Yeah, I certainly don't come away from the weekend with any big picture concern about Texas.
Mm-mm.
It just kind of showed that, what we thought all along, which is that, if you can get them off schedule on the mound, because they're not as deep as others, then they might have some problems, and voila, Yep. And yeah, certainly Arkansas really showed out in this series. And, I like the Wood Gackle piggyback. I think that's something that, I think should continue. And because you can cover between the two of them, you feel pretty good about 8 innings at least. And so, all good points. Let's get to another sweep.
Yep.
And that's Mississippi State over Kentucky this weekend.
Loud.
And State stays on track to make it into the postseason after all. Certainly a sweep will help with that in a big way. Sweeps are a bit of a separator when you're looking to make up some ground. And then on the flip side, I'll let you talk about more of the State side of it. I'll chime in on Kentucky, and my feelings on this were kind of validated by our buddy Runes, because he was on the call for today's game, the finale. And it just feels like Kentucky is a little out of gas. Like they really They had their peak. I think it peaked with the series win against Tennessee
Yeah.
in Knoxville. So they they've done a lot of good work. I think they're still okay to make a regional, barring like they just go 1-5 or 0-6 in their last couple of weekends. You feel pretty good. They're still going to be, I guess I shouldn't say, but in the conversation to be in a regional is how I should probably put it. But they've dealt with so many injuries. Hindle is Ethan Hindle is out, and Gargett and Herrera have little nagging things. Cole Hage missed some time. He's back, but clearly isn't the same kind of guy right now. It just kind of goes on. And so that they feel like they're kind of just limping figuratively, literally and figuratively. And they found some nice things in the mound, but Ben Cleaver wasn't as sharp. Nick McKay got them deep in the game, but wasn't nearly his peak. And 1 week after Nate Harris was awesome, he wasn't efficient enough to get into the middle innings in his start this weekend. And so, when that rotation's not doing what it's done, in the weeks when they've been more successful, Kentucky just doesn't have the firepower to land knockout punches offensively. It's really hard for them to kind of have those big innings that just put teams away. And then B is they just don't have the bullpen depth to be able to cover consistently 4 or 5 innings a game. They just don't have enough guys they trust to be able to cover all that ground. And so those two things combined just make it to where it seems like every Kentucky game is stressful. They've had very few games. They've gotten blown out, and that's a credit to them. But they've also had very few games that were laughers on the other end. Like it feels like every one of their games comes down to the last at bat, and that can have a cumulative effect of just the fatigue of we're having to scratch and claw and fight for every single inch. And when you're, a little bit under talented relative to the top 7 or 8 in teams in the league, that's kind of how you have to live, and that's just tough. So a big sweep though for State. So I'll let you kind of fill in the gaps there with them.
Yeah. Let's start with Kentucky, because I do feel like after this sweep, they're 14th in the pecking order right now, and there's only 16 teams in the conference. I do feel like they've got work to do to make sure that they make the postseason because of this weekend. They host Oklahoma. I would think that that's a series that, to me, looks like a toss-up on paper. They're kind of similar clubs, pitching heavy. But Kentucky at home, they've got to win that. And then they go to Vandy. Again, that's a team I feel like Kentucky can play with. I think there'll be tight games. If they can go 3-3 in those last 6, they're probably okay. Anything less than that's a problem.
Well, and
especially
I will
since they're the 14th.
Right. Team. And I will interject here too. They are kind of the one team that's in the postseason discussion in the SEC that from a bubble perspective might have an RPI problem.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because in between those series, they play a game against Northern Kentucky at home, which is 221 in RPI. And just by virtue of playing that game, they're probably going to go the wrong direction. So that might be a pray for rain kind of thing if you're a Kentucky fan, because you're certainly not going to help yourself regardless of what happens in that game.
Certainly. Kentucky did not play Missouri. They did play South Carolina and won 2 out of 3. But I do feel like, if you're Kentucky, getting 13 with an RPI around 40 is probably where you've got to be. Anything less than that is going to be hold your breath and hope for no stolen bids. If you're Mississippi State, I mean, they are 4-0 since they made this change, and obviously, it's always interesting when you make a head coaching change. There's typically a bump. Guys relax. They galvanize around the loss, so to speak, and they're able to to play really well. certainly Mississippi State played well this weekend. They're at home. They've got Ole Miss at home next weekend. And I do feel like with the way those two teams are playing, Mississippi State's got a great chance to win that series. And if they do that, they're going to make a regional. Because then they go to Mizzou, and although Mizzou played better, and we'll talk about that later, Mississippi State is certainly capable of sweeping that series, at least winning 2 or 3. If they do that, they're going to be in the postseason, and I feel like this sweep this weekend just set Mississippi State up. It gave them some room for error. I think they're going to win 14 SEC games this year, and I feel like that's going to get them in. And the thing that really stood out for me was the bullpen. Their starters have been pretty good all year, but their bullpen just came in and put up 0 after 0. And Kentucky's a team that makes you work. They make you they stretch your pitch counts. They make you they force you into mistakes. And Mississippi State has not been the greatest defensive club this year, and they were able to overcome that and won the series. And I feel like this is a team now, if they make the postseason, they're a little bit scary. They're a team that I would not want to see roll in as my 3 seed right now. They just seem to have a little bit of a swagger that was maybe missing. And because of this recent upswing, again, they've still got work to do, but I do feel like Mississippi State's a club that has positioned themselves with these next 2 weeks, certainly winnable series, that they're going to go in with a lot of momentum. And they're a team that could get to Hoover and win some games there because of how the trajectory that they're on right now. And because of that, I mean, you know, it sort of, and I hesitate to say this, but it sort of reminds me of the Alabama year a couple of years ago when Brad Bohannon was let go and Jason Jackson took the team, and they just went on a run and ended up hosting a regional. And I'm sorry, Mississippi State, I'm not projecting that, but I do feel like there's a trajectory for this team that could get them near that, and in a position where they're really trending in the right direction as postseason rolls around. And that's kind of all you can ask for at this point. You make the change early, you hope for the best, and certainly through 4 games, you know, they drilled Memphis, they swept Kentucky, they've got Ole Miss coming up, and then they go to Missouri. It's all set up for Mississippi State to be rolling as they head into a regional and try to wreck somebody's year.
Another team that's kind of in that box is Florida, as they sweep South Carolina. That they're kind of just going toe-to-toe with Mississippi State in terms of clawing their way back into things. And certainly this weekend was a loud statement. They swung the bats extremely well. You know, we can nitpick some of the mound stuff, and I'm sure we'll do that a little bit. But they just really took care of business against the Gamecocks. And on the flip side, with South Carolina, I won't name any specific names because I just always am careful with this kind of thing, but body language is really bad for South Carolina. And look, if I got my brains beat in all weekend and you knew where your season was headed, like, I'm sure my body language wouldn't be great all the time. So I'm not even really necessarily holding that against anyone, but they just look like a defeated team. Yeah, and that hasn't really been the case a lot this year. I think we've given them a lot of credit for the fact that, look, Mizzou has not been competitive through most of its 24 games in the league. South Carolina has. They haven't won a lot of them, but they've been pretty competitive week to week. And so this was the first time where I really saw that in South Carolina. It just didn't feel like they were in it. Yeah. And maybe that's just the results. It could be. But I also just wouldn't – I would understand, even if it's not what you want to see as a coach or as a fan of that team, I do kind of understand how hard it would be to stay in it when the season has gone the way it's had most recently with Florida, just kind of running them off their own field.
Yeah. Well, let's start with Florida. So Liam Peterson doesn't even finish his first batter in game one. He comes back, wasn't great, but he gave them some length. Today, Aiden King only goes 3 innings or so in his start. Rain comes in, stops it. Right. So Florida had to deal with that and still was able to piece it together. And I feel like with all the injuries that they've had, being able to do that was, I guess, for them to overcome that showed me a lot. They got Pierce Capola back. He only threw an inning. It wasn't pretty, but it was scoreless. He walked a couple guys, but he was, maybe next week he can pitch a little more and so on. But I do feel like Florida is a team right now. They kind of believe, and tons of injuries. They're only playing 10 position players, which is kind of hard to believe in today's baseball. But they're getting pitching from guys who really they weren't counting on. And Jake Clemente has been right now he might be put Dylan Delancey aside, he might be the next best reliever in the conference with the way he's pitching right now. Since April 1, I think he's given up 1 run, and he's throwing twice a weekend. I mean, he's really doing a great job for them. He's probably their MVP right now. And they're in a position where I expect them to make a regional now. They were 1-11 in conference play. 1-11. And now they're going to have to falter to not make a regional. They're going to have to get swept and then maybe at Texas, which, certainly can happen, and then struggle the final weekend against Bama to not make a regional. And right now, the way they're playing, I expect them to go and give Texas all they want, right? Even though their pitching is all screwed up because of the rain this weekend. Peterson ended up throwing on Sunday, King on Saturday. I don't know what they'll do next week, who will pitch what day, but it's they're a problem right now. Sully's got it figured out. He's a freaking wizard. So I do feel like that Florida is in a position that they're going to make a regional, and they're another one of these teams that you do not want to see because they're playing so well. Now, other dugout, South Carolina. They have been competitive. They fought hard. They have done the things they needed to do. They just weren't real talented, and they lost games. Blew leads, did things that you don't want your team to do. And then this weekend, they got thumped, and I didn't see a whole lot of fight, honestly. I was able to watch quite a bit of it. I was at home this weekend, not at a ballpark, so I watched a lot of it. And this was the weekend that made me question if this is going to work. And it wasn't good. So are they going to win another conference game? They go to Auburn. Auburn's playing great. That's a road series. If you can't beat Florida at home, I don't know that you can beat Auburn on the road. Okay. Then they've got LSU with all that pitching coming to Columbia for the final weekend. And I know all the storylines with Paul and LSU and all that good stuff. And maybe they rise up and he's got something special for them. But I'm questioning if they've already won their last SEC game. And if you're South Carolina, you're thankful for Missouri because that takes some of the focus off of you, but this has been a terrible year. And Mark Kingston was 13-17 and went to a regional last year, and you fired him. And this team is going to win 5 games, in conference play. That's hard to swallow, and I mean, it's gonna be up to the leadership on that team. It's going to be up to the coaches in that dugout to try to get them to show something over these next 2 weekends to just kind of prove that, okay, we're laying a foundation here and we just need to go out and recruit and get better players, and this is going to work next year. Because after these last 3 games, I'm questioning that it was not a strong performance.
Agreed. And you had such a good point about Missouri taking some heat off, because let's say they don't win another conference game and finish 5-25, like that would be the worst winning percentage, right? In like, let's call it just the most modern version of the SEC, certainly in this version of the SEC post A&M and Missouri joining.
Right.
And yet, because we're going to have a team worse, it does take some of the heat off it. But you're right. I mean, and it's going to be a tough offseason regardless, whether they stick with it or move, just because you're losing Ethan Petrie, and they don't have Petrie right now anyway because of injury, but you're going to lose him. And, you know, Henry Kazmar's likely to get drafted. Kennedy Jones is out of eligibility. Some of the arms that have been somewhat inconsistent but are talented, guys like Brandon Stone, very well could get drafted. You know, so it's not even like, hey, this is a young team that we're just gonna continue to get better with. It's not necessarily that simple. And I'll be clear, like I have a hard time imagining on the South Carolina side them running off a Paul Mainieri, and it would be more like Paul Mainieri coming to his own decision of, you know what, I don't need this, right? Yeah. And that's not, I've not talked to Paul. I've not talked to anybody who's talked to Paul specifically about that. But if there were going to be a change, I have to imagine it would come from that end of like, and maybe there's a little bit of mutual element to it, but it would just be Paul saying, hey, this is not something I need to do. This is not how I want to spend my time. And honestly, I wouldn't blame him. But if he sticks around, if he's still around, it is going to be a massively important offseason for South Carolina, because another season like this is not going to fly.
Yeah, and how much money do they have to spend in the portal? I mean, that's the other part of this, because that's a big part of today's world, and they need a talent influx. And bringing in freshmen is great, but I don't know that there's time for that. I think they need to go out and bring in people who can help you right now. And in order to do that, you got to compete with the Tennessees and the LSUs and the Arkansas and A&M and Texas and all these people that are going to spend. And can you keep up? That's where we are today.
Yeah, no doubt. That is going to be the big factor for them. Is we are in an age where you have to be competitive in that realm, or else you're playing from behind. Two teams that we know for sure are not playing from behind in terms of talent acquisition are Texas A&M and LSU. And over the weekend, Texas A&M takes 2 of 3 against LSU, and had it not been for Anthony Ianson giving one of the best pitching performances of the entire season in the game of the series, A&M might have swept it. Yep. But that's what it was. And LSU, like, frankly, LSU pitched pretty well all weekend.
They did.
Cade Anderson was good. Ryan Prager was just a little better. And then obviously Ianson. And then even today, Kason Evans,
his pitch count got up.
Yeah, he wasn't efficient, and it hamstrung his ability to get deep into the game. But even still, A&M had 2 runs going to the 8th inning.
They had it where they wanted. They had Cowan on the mound. They had the lead, and it just, I mean, Caden Sorrell hit a bomb, and that was the difference in the game. I mean, I feel like A&M really needed this, because if they wouldn't have had this game, one, they got swept last week. They would have lost. Granted, for a really good team, number 1 and number 2, they would have lost to LSU. And then Well, yeah, Missouri's out there, and you feel pretty confident about getting those wins. You still got to go to Georgia. So it would have been a really hard road for them to get to where they wanted to be. So this one game, I feel like, was way more meaningful to them than it was, debilitating for LSU. Okay. I feel like it was just more meaningful. And now if you're A&M, you're in a position where you're feeling good about yourself. You had the late rally to win. You're in a position where you're going to win some games next week against Missouri. You got to feel. And then you go into Georgia, and Georgia's really good at Foley Field. But if you just not get swept, I think you're in a regional. If you win that series, you're probably a 2 seed. So it's that kind of thing where, a few weeks ago, A&M would have taken that. Hey, we're, as bad as things are for us to be in a position where we are now, we'll certainly take it. And they have. And think about it. They have wins over Tennessee. They have wins over Arkansas on the road. And they have wins over LSU. No bubble team is going to have anything similar to that. So when it comes down to committee room, if they need it, and they may not, but if they do, they're going to come down and they're going to have those feathers in their cap to differentiate them between somebody who has 3 games against the quad 1 opponents, right? And they're going to have 3 victories, series victories. So if you're A&M, you feel great. If you're LSU, yeah, I mean, I still like the Kason Evans as the 3rd starter. I think that should be the new norm. He's just got to be more efficient, and he's a freshman. He made his 2nd start of his college career. He's going to get better as he does this more often, and I feel like that. They've got Arkansas next weekend. That's a monster series again. I feel like they will continue to do that. And I mean, think about Cade Anderson. He struck out 12. Ianson struck out 14. They are just too dominant. Just a 1-2 punch. Is anybody better from a 1-2 punch standpoint? I don't know of anyone. I feel like I keep up. They're in great shape. So it's just a question of offensively, or can they score enough? Curiel didn't have the greatest weekend, facing 3 left-handed starters. I think that had something to do with it. What does their lineup look like? Jared Jones was in the leadoff spot some. Where does that land? But I do feel like LSU's in a great position. They're one of the best teams in the country. They just happen to play in a tough environment against a team that really needed to win, and that team got the big hit against them. And that, for me, is the bottom line. I feel like LSU is going to go back home, even if they lose the Arkansas series, because Arkansas's, again, one of the best teams in the country. I feel like LSU will go to South Carolina. They'll take care of business. They'll hit Hoover, and they always play well in Hoover, and they'll be on the upswing when regionals come around.
Yeah, for LSU, I always go back to look at. I have some concerns. I don't think the lineup as it's constructed right now doesn't really scare me a ton. There are some individual guys in any given moment, right? Like anytime Jared Jones is at the plate, you understand the ball could leave the yard, but it's not like he's having a great season in SEC play. Yeah. Stephen Milam has really struggled in SEC play, and they've got a lot of really nice hitters, but it's just it doesn't have that same kind of fear factor as what we've been used to with previous LSU lineups, and then the bullpen, especially with Kason Evans now in the rotation, it does feel a little bit short.
It's lighter.
Yeah, but what I keep going back to is that I think the biggest advantage you can have in college baseball, based on the way the season and the postseason especially are formatted, are 2 starting pitchers that you have a better than even chance of winning a game with them on the mound. And they have that, to your point, as well as anybody. And so if you're telling me they get to go Cade Anderson and Anthony Ianson 1-2 in the first 2 games of a regional, the first 2 games of a super, And the first 2 games in Omaha, and oh, by the way, in Omaha, those 2 guys could probably throw 80% of the games you're going to play in Omaha. That's a pretty good advantage to have, and that'll paper over a lot of things. Just ask Vanderbilt when they had Rocker and Leiter and really that great a team around them. So anyway, that's just a big advantage for LSU. So yes, I have concerns about this team, but I do think their strength is so strong that the rest of it is mitigated because of that strength.
Yeah, and I feel like they're still one of the top 3 teams in the country. I feel like there's Texas, there's Arkansas, there's LSU, and then there's kind of this, muddle. And week to week, there are other teams that hop into that group and maybe even surpass those teams, but then they fall back another week. And I feel like LSU, because of their pitching, and I do think, Cowan gave up the big hit, but he's been so good all year, dude. I mean, I trust him. So, and then Evans, whatever his role needs to be, I mean, he's a heck of an arm, and he's going to continue to ascend into an important role. I feel like LSU, even if they lose to Arkansas next weekend, I feel like they're really primed for a postseason run.
I would say real quick, the last thing before we move on here is I would say LSU would be a team that when you get to regionals, assuming they're hosting, that you could be creative with your pitching staff and maybe throw, especially because as a Baton Rouge regional, you are relatively likely to get a SWAC, 4 seed or a traveling 4 seed from like the Northeast or something.
Win with offense. Yeah.
Right. But I think back to a couple of years ago when LSU threw Paul Skeens against a Tulane team that was like 15-40 or something.
Yeah.
So if they're willing to do that,
around.
right? Yeah. If they're willing to do that, they are going to throw Cade Anderson game 1 against whoever, I have to assume. Yeah. So anyway, Oklahoma wins 2 of 3 against Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Kind of quietly, Oklahoma just keeps chugging along. They'll be an interesting team for y'all to debate on the Nerdcast this week, just because they are one of those teams that's in that squishy part of the standings here where it's hard to suss out who's who, but you maybe like their team more than teams like Ole Miss who they just beat, and you might like them more than Alabama, but their RPI is not there. So they're probably a 2 seed for now, but they do just kind of quietly keep trucking along. They're not such a juggernaut that they're sweeping a lot of teams, save Missouri. But they are winning a whole bunch of series, and they're a little like LSU in terms of, look, you give me Kyson Witherspoon and we're going to win a whole bunch of games. And then with the way, Crossland was great in game 2 of this series, Malachi is pitching better, just in terms of consistency. And so they've got the building blocks of a really dangerous postseason team. And I got asked on Waypoints this morning if I was surprised that Oklahoma has won that series against Ole Miss. And I was just like, no, I just think Oklahoma's a better team than Ole Miss. Like, I certainly like Oklahoma's pitching better. Yeah. I have serious questions about Ole Miss's pitching. And the Ole Miss offense has cooled a little bit as time has gone on. And it does feel like Ole Miss has been in a little bit of, they're not totally fading away to where they're going to miss the postseason or anything, but they have faded a little bit from where they were a month or 6 weeks ago. So just a really good series win for Oklahoma to keep things moving forward.
Yeah. I felt like Oklahoma at home should win that series, and they did. They won 2 out of 3, and that puts them in a position where they go to Kentucky next weekend, and then they host Texas. So, I mean, they probably have to win both to host. I don't know that 3-3 is going to be good enough, barring a Hoover run. I feel like, but that's possible. I mean, Kentucky just got swept. Granted, they're going to be good at home, and they're going to be really motivated because Kentucky needs those wins just to get to the postseason. But that's a really big series for both teams because Oklahoma's trying to host. Kentucky's just trying to continue their season. That's massive. And then Oklahoma and Texas, I understand that's a rivalry. I'm kind of new to this whole Oklahoma Texas thing, but I do feel like that they will care about that game, those 3 games a whole lot. And should they be able to take 2 out of 3? Texas is having a great year. That's going to boost that RPI. It's going to boost their just overall stock in general and put them in a position to host. So, yeah, it's all there. Because of what they did this weekend, it is laid out on a platter for them to go out and take it. So, can they do it? For Ole Miss, this hurt. This was an opportunity to go out. Road games count more than home games, 1.3 versus 0.7. Okay. I don't want to nerd out on you guys, but that's what the RPI cares about. So for them to not do that, they're in a bit of a deficit right now. They go to Mississippi State, who apparently is unbeatable at this point under Justin Parker. So they've got to go in and take that series on the road at Mississippi State. Beat your rival. You want to beat them anyway, but you really need it if you're going to get back in this hosting mix. And then they host Auburn, who suddenly is really, really good no matter where they play. And they had struggled on the road, and they go to Knoxville and win. So it's a tough next 2 weeks for the Rebels. It's looking like a 2 seed at this point. So unless they exceed expectations, they're going to be a 2 seed somewhere. And since there are going to be a whole lot of SEC teams to host, Ole Miss is going to go to someone who's not an SEC team, and maybe that works out for them. But I do feel like this has been a positive season in general for this program that had a couple bad years. We didn't know what they were going to look like, and they have exceeded expectations. At least mine exceeded expectations, and are in prime position to make a run. And they're still, while they don't blow you away on the mound, they hit a lot of home runs. They've got some pop. If they can get healthy, I think this is a team that could give people problems in the postseason. But I do feel like they're kind of at a crossroads. We talked about this with some other teams. You've got 2 tough spots left, 2 tough weekends. You could go one of 2 ways. You could just nosedive and go into the postseason kind of on a swoon, or you could figure this stuff out and really rise and elevate and give the committee something to think about, and maybe you get a host. And if Ole Miss hosts, they're going to win that regional because they're so good at home. So I do feel like there's just so much riding on these next 2 weekends.
Yeah, it does feel like, just real quick on the Hoover thing, like it does feel like this is going to be a year where there's not going to be a ton from an do you make the postseason or not perspective in Hoover, which has been the case now for most of the last several years. But from a will you host or not, it does feel like there could be a lot of the line there, because we have this interesting situation where you've got some teams that are all in that right now in that 13, 14 win range that have RPIs of like 20 and then RPIs of 4, and they have the same record. Right. And so it just feels like sorting that out is going to be a challenge, but Hoover will help probably suss some of that out. The last series we need to talk about, Mark, is Georgia sweeping Missouri. And, it was so close.
Missouri played so good, close. Dude.
Yeah, they were in all 3 games. Now, I know the first game doesn't look like it because it finished 9-2, but they were in that one too. Mm-hmm. They were in all 3 games. Game 3 was tied in the 8th inning, and they just could not close the deal. And honest to goodness, if Mizzou had won today, they would have led the podcast. There's not a shadow of doubt. Because we need to celebrate victories.
Yeah.
But, man, like – and to actually evaluate this series in a serious manner, like – man, Georgia's offense away from Foley Field is just so different, to the point where I don't totally understand it, because it's not just that Foley Field plays small and Taylor Stadium in Columbia probably plays as big as any SEC park in the country. Like it's not just that, right? That's not the only factor you would think, but that their offense is just night and day away from Foley Field. And that almost led to them being the one team to get victimized by Missouri this year. But it was not to be, credit to Georgia for fighting through that. That's a specific type of pressure that you and I have talked about of like, oh God, we don't want to be the one that's going to get clowned
right
the rest of the season. And they got great pitching, which I know, okay, it's Mizzou, whatever, but they got really good starting pitching all weekend and really created a situation where they didn't have to tax the bullpen too much.
Yeah. We have, I guess, labeled Missouri as a team that's been non-competitive for a lot of the conference season. They were competitive all 3 games. They got great pitching. They had guys who were coming back from injury who came in and pitched well. Sam Horn was really good in game 2. Brock Lucas was equally good. I think they each threw 3 hitless innings, something like that. It's just the middle part didn't really work out. But I do feel like they're going to put it together at some point. They're running out of time. I mean, you're 0-24, right, with six games left, and Texas A&M is not on the road. Is not a team I feel a whole lot of confidence about with the way they swing the bat. But Mississippi State at home, maybe you can do what you did against Georgia and squeeze one out. I mean, go 1-29. Nobody wants to go in 30. I do think that the offense, I mean, Georgia did a good job against them. But the other part of this is Georgia's just on the road. They had that great weekend at Florida where they just scored 1,000 runs. But after that, they really haven't hit a lot on the road. They pitched pretty well, but it's just a different game completely. It's like all their games at Foley Field, they win 10-8, and then their games on the road, they win 4-2. And I mean, I don't have a great explanation for how that's, why that's transpiring the way it is. I do give them credit for finding ways to win because, as you mentioned, you go to Missouri, everybody around the league is kind of hoping that Missouri doesn't go to over. I think a lot of people are. I am. And that only leaves, if you're playing them, to your point, that's a different kind of pressure. And for Georgia to be able to grab those 3 wins, especially when you're trailing late in the game, to be able to get that done, that puts them in a really good position now to close strong because, I mean, they go to Alabama. That's, for me, a toss-up series. Georgia hasn't played great on the road, but, I mean, they're good, but they're not overwhelming. So that's a toss-up for me. And then they host A&M, who's really good, but Georgia's really good at home. So you kind of like Georgia's shot they're number 1 in the RPI. They're in a great position to get a top 8, and whether you're 1 or 8, as we talked about, it really doesn't matter. You just want one of those 8 spots. And I think with 2 weeks left, they're in position to snag one of those, just like they did last year, except this year they have more pitching, where last year they were just kind of, smoke and mirrors, hoping to win with offense. This year they can actually pitch it a little bit, and I feel like that's what they've got to do. So does 3-3 get them there? Maybe. I feel like they're in a position where it's going to depend on what some of the other teams around the country do. But if they go 4-2, if they win both series, then yeah, they're going to be a top 8. And if you're Georgia, I mean that's all you can ask for at this point, to be a top 8 and be in a position where you're going to play at home all the way through, where you're playing so well and not have to go somewhere else where you aren't at least hitting as well as you are at home. So yeah, that's where I am on Georgia, Missouri. I mean, it was a fascinating 3 games where if you're a Missouri fan, or you're a Georgia fan, you're biting your nails. If you're a Missouri fan, you're thinking, yes, this is the time. But it just, Georgia was able to make the plays in all 3 games.
Yep, and that's right, and that's why, amongst all the talk of us trying, and this is still pertinent. Like, how is the committee going to view teams that played Missouri,
Yeah.
Versus not? In comparing those things, you still got to win the games, and Georgia found a way, even though a couple of them were closer than you would have anticipated. But that's baseball, so Georgia ultimately gets it done there. All right, Mark, that's going to do it for this edition of Highway to Hoover, production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. Couple quick programming things as we get out of here. One, Mark and I confirmed prior to going live, we will be doing a live stream episode of Highway to Hoover the Monday before the tournament starts. So play starts Tuesday with the teams 9 through 16.
Yep.
Monday is, the day before. We will be doing just like we did last year. So if you remember last year, same deal. It'll be Mark and I at a bare minimum. We may invite some friends along. Like we did last year, we had a couple of other folks jump in. We may do that, but if not, it'll just be Mark and I, and that's fine too. So TBD on exactly the time. I fly into Birmingham in the early evening, so some of it will just depend on how my plane being on time and how quickly I'm able to get from airplane to hotel and get set up and all that. So we'll have to. I wish I could be more specific on timing, but we will have to figure that out as time goes on. So, but just kind of block off your evening for that Monday. Mark and I will be previewing the SEC tournament. So we've got that.
Yeah.
So,
and it's a new tournament this year because you got all 16 teams there, single elimination, different format. It's there's lots to talk about.
Yeah, and I'll be interested, Mark, to see like if you're those middle of the pack SEC teams that probably aren't hosting, but also aren't in danger of getting knocked out of the tournament if they lose their opening game. I'll be interested to see how fans travel to this deal when you're not, it used to be as long as you were in the, the top 8 here or whatever like you knew you were getting 2 games. And so,
right.
Fans could have some level of certainty, but now a little bit different. So I'll just, that's something that, we'll just have to see how it plays out. I still suspect crowds will be great, but I do wonder if there are certain fan bases that just may sit this out to prepare, especially if you think you might have to travel for a regional, right?
Right.
There are certain fans that just might sit that out. So we'll have to see. All right, folks, that's a wrap on this episode of Highway to Hoover, production of SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. Thank you to Academy Sports and Outdoors and Tecovas Boots for sponsoring this and every episode of Highway to Hoover. Thank you, Mark, for joining me as always, and thank you, the listeners, for listening. We'll talk to y'all soon.